we begin with a developing story we're following this morning. A tsunami has struck parts of Russia's Kuril Islands and Japan's northern island of Hokkaido, with warnings that more waves are yet to come. The tsunami was triggered by a massive magnitude 8.8 earthquake off Russia's Kamchatka peninsula, one of the strongest quakes ever recorded. Several countries, including the United States and the Philippines, have now issued tsunami warnings for their Pacific coastlines. These images show waves arriving on Japan's eastern coast. The Japan Meteorological Agency said a tsunami as high as 60 centimeters had been detected. It warns that larger waves could yet follow. Authorities have told nearly 2 million people across the country to evacuate their homes and get to higher ground. Let's bring in journalist Sonja Blaschke, who joins us from Tokyo. And let's talk about the situation in Japan, Sonja. The country is on high alert. What can you tell us about the situation on the ground?
Yes, the whole country is under tsunami advisory, and a large part is also under evacuation warning from the north in Hokkaido to the center in Wakayama. And so far, as you mentioned earlier, tsunamis up to 60 centimeters have been registered. However, warnings up to 3 meters are in place. And the Meteorological Agency insisted that people need to stay on the alert because in a quake in, for example, in 1952 in the same region, the highest waves only came 9 hours after the earthquake. So they expect that people have to stay on the alert really for the whole day. And that's becoming an issue because Japan is experiencing very high summer temperatures of up to 40 degrees. So yeah, it's a really tricky situation. Do you stay away from the coast, but at the same time you have to watch out for heat stroke? Yeah, very tricky situation in Japan right now.
And we hear that the Fukushima power plant has also been evacuated. What can you tell us about that?
There's actually not much information about this in Japan at the moment. Obviously, they've learned the lesson from the last time, from the last big earthquake and tsunami in 2011, to take precautions there. But as of now, I don't have too many detailed information on the situation there. Near the Fukushima area in Sendai, the airport has been evacuated, and also trains and ferries have been affected.
Around 2 million people have been ordered to evacuate along the Japanese eastern seaboard. Talk us through the safety protocol.
So usually the first thing that happens is a push notice to the mobile phones. People use apps, and there are also alerts through email. And then depending on where you are and where the earthquake takes place, people have between just 10 minutes and about 1 hour to reach higher ground. In 2011, it was between 30 minutes and 60 minutes. This time it's very different because the earthquake epicenter was so far away. So people have been waiting for hours now and have to keep waiting because the time lag between the first, second, third wave is so long. It can take up to an hour. So they will have to stay evacuated there for much longer. And very early in the whole process, they were closing flood doors, for example. People were trying not necessarily to get really far away from the coast, but really to reach either higher ground or higher buildings. So that was one of the lessons learned from 2011, I think.
Yeah. 2011, of course, when a devastating tsunami hit the Japanese coast. How much does the memory of that earthquake, that tsunami that followed, contribute to the unease about the current situation?
Several people interviewed by Japanese media have said they are very worried. Memories are coming back, obviously, and I think it has given these warnings a whole different sense of urgency, whereas before it was more like a theoretical danger or risk, so to speak, but people know the extreme damage a tsunami can cause and are more aware of the risks of, waves, one wave following the other, waves, higher waves coming in much later, as we've actually seen this time as well. So the earlier waves were actually a bit lower than maybe the third or fourth wave.
That's journalist Sonja Blaschke with the latest from Tokyo. Thank you so much for your reporting, Sonja. Well, the waves caused by the earthquake have already hit Russia's far east Pacific coast. 3 waves rolled across low-lying areas of Severokurilsk. That's the main settlement on the Kuril Island. Authorities there say residents were evacuated to higher ground. Russia's RIA news agency says buildings have been damaged along with a power grid, but as of yet, no serious injuries have been reported. Let's talk now to Juri Rescheto. He covers Russia for us from Riga. Juri, the quake hit off the coast of Russia's Kamchatka peninsula. What do we know about the situation in the affected areas?
Well, Nicole, the Russian authorities report that the magnitude reached 8.57, making it the strongest earthquake in the Kamchatka seismic zone since 1952. In Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsk, the regional capital of Kamchatka, the shaking intensity was at least 7 points in this city. After the main earthquake, there were about 30 so-called aftershocks. Seismologists warned that strong aftershocks would continue for at least another month. After the earthquake, a tsunami warning was issued. A dangerous, strong tsunami was observed on the coast of Kamchatka and in Severokurilsk, Sakhalin region. In one area of Kamchatka, a weather station recorded a tsunami 3 to 4 meters high. In Severokurilsk, according to media reports and videos on the internet, the tsunami flooded the port and a fishing company, and also a powerful wave in the port swept ships from their moorings out to sea. Also in the Kuril Islands, you said it, about 3,000 people were evacuated to safe areas. That's the latest from there.
This, for all intents and purposes, looks like an event of historic proportions. Were authorities prepared for such a massive quake, Juri?
Well, look, there are videos online from the Russian Civil Defense Agency that do not show any major damage. What we can see is a wall collapse in a kindergarten building in Petropavlovsk, Kamchatsk, but no one seems to be injured seriously. The authorities say that there are injured people, but no deaths so far. Also, after the earthquake, the internet was temporarily unavailable, but was later restored, it said. We don't know what the situation is like in rural areas. Kamchatka is huge and relatively thinly populated. I've been there a few times. Most of the buildings, Nicole, are old Soviet-style concrete blocks from the 70s and 80s across the coast, which are already on the point of collapse without any earthquake. We hear that the power grid on the island Sakhalin has been destroyed and the electricity has gone out. So we have to wait for further reports and, of course, see the consequences of the tsunami. We must wait for further reports before we draw any conclusions about the authorities.
Russia on high alert today as well. That was Juri Rescheto covering events for us from Riga. Thank you so much. And we'd like to bring you some analysis on the scale of this quake now and bring in meteorologist Matthew Cappucci, who joins us from Washington, D.C. Matthew, this 8.8 earthquake is the strongest quake since 2011. What made it so powerful?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To give folks perspective as to what an 8.8 is like, that's the equivalent of detonating 1 trillion kilograms of TNT, of explosive. That's how powerful this thing was, the strongest anywhere worldwide since the infamous Japanese earthquake of March 11, 2011, and the 6th most significant earthquake worldwide of all recorded history. Now, a lot of folks are familiar with the term Ring of Fire. At the edge of the Pacific tectonic plate, there's a seismically active zone where that plate bumps into other plates. You get volcanoes and you get earthquakes. In this case, the dense Pacific plate, dense because it's being crushed by the weight of the ocean on top, is subducting or sliding underneath the Okhotsk plate along something called the Kuril-Kamchatka Trench. Now, these two plates essentially bump into each other. They collide at a rate of 77 millimeters per year, roughly 3 inches. Doesn't sound like that much, but as you're crunching these plates together, that builds up an exceptional amount of tension, of stress, of friction, and that suddenly gets released in the form of these earthquakes. Now, some earthquakes are side to side. We call those strike slip. Some are, one way like this, one way like this. This is something called a megathrust quake, where the dense oceanic plate subducts underneath the other plate. You get the seafloor to go up and down a little bit, and that jiggling, that displacement to the seafloor causes a tsunami, and that's the concern tonight.
What can we expect in terms of tsunamis now? We already saw the first waves hitting Japan and Russia, and several countries have, of course, issued warnings for their Pacific coastlines.
Well, it's important to remember that the first wave isn't always the biggest, and sometimes waves can be spaced out tens of minutes or even hours or longer until the water finally recedes after the initial rise of water levels. The other thing to remember, too, when tsunamis move across the open ocean, they're moving at speeds around the equivalent of like a jet aircraft at 500 miles per hour, 800 plus kilometers per hour, and all that energy is displaced and sort of dispersed throughout the entire sea column. Only when you really get close to the coastline does that tsunami really start to manifest itself, because you're bottling up all that energy into a much shallower depth of the ocean, and that's when you have enough oomph to push water ashore. Now, back on November 5th of 1952, we had a very similarly strength earthquake in almost the exact same area, same mechanism too, and that one created a Pacific-wide tsunami. So the concern is, with all the similar attributes of this one, we could see a pretty similar result in a very wide-reaching tsunami that could potentially impact all the way to North America.
Yet, where is it most dangerous right now? Closer to the epicenter of the quake or on low-lying islands further away?
Well, we've already seen a roughly 3 to 4+ meter rise of water levels in the Kamchatka Peninsula. So obviously very dangerous there. But the tricky thing, it's not just a gradual weakening of the tsunami wave as you go out in distance. It's not quite like a ripple in a pond where the ripple sort of loses steam with distance. It comes down to something called bathymetry, or the shape of the seafloor too. So islands, island chains, archipelagos, how the coastline bends, all these things, the slope of the continental shelf, all these things can influence local conditions and local impacts from a tsunami. And so ultimately that danger could be realized all the way into California too. But right now I'd say Hawaii definitely has the biggest threat.
Russian scientists have called the quake a unique event and warn aftershocks could last for up to a month. What does that mean for people living in the affected areas? What do they need to brace for?
Yeah, so whenever you have an earthquake, there tend to be other earthquakes that follow it. Any slip in the Earth's crust essentially results in crunching that can add stress to other parts or other faults, basically fractures in the crust, and cause additional earthquakes. Now, earlier last week, we had multiple magnitude 5, 6 earthquakes that wound up being precursors, foreshocks preceding this main magnitude 8.8 quake. In any given situation, there's a roughly 1 in 15 chance you get a bigger earthquake following a single quake. This one is very likely the main shock of the sequence, but we do still anticipate many significant aftershocks, so significant rattling in the Kamchatka Peninsula, and the chance that 1 or 2, magnitude 7 quakes could trigger an additional tsunami that would affect local regions around that peninsula.
As meteorologist Matthew Cappucci, always great to get your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.